Hi, I'm Patrick, and today I'll be showing you how to play Rackham's Confrontation using Tabletop Simulator. The first thing you'll want to do is go to the Tabletop Simulator Workshop and download the Confrontation mod. I've included a link in the description below. Once you have the mod downloaded, start a new game from Tabletop Simulator. To navigate in Tabletop Simulator, you can use the WASD keys to move the position of your camera. The mouse wheel will zoom you in and out. Right-click and hold to rotate the camera. To begin setting up a game, you will first need to pull out a battle map from this gray bag in the upper right corner. Simply right-click on the bag and then click Search. You will see a number of battle maps with different deployment zones pre-drawn on them to support different scenarios. Simply drag the board you wish to use onto the table somewhere in the center. You can use the Q and E key to rotate the board as well as anything else in Tabletop Simulator. Once the board is in place, right-click on the board, go to Toggles, and then Lock. This will prevent the board from being accidentally moved. I wanted to take a second to mention that in the future, I plan to publish pre-configured scenarios for TTS Workshop. These will have a board and scenario objectives already laid out so that all you will need to do is cover the rest of the board in some terrain and pull out your models and cards. To load these scenarios, you will launch the base Confrontation 3.5 game first, and then, assuming you already have the scenarios downloaded, you will navigate to that scenario, click the three dots in the upper right corner, and then click Additive Load. This will load in the scenario content into the base game content. Next, we will want to fill our board with terrain. All of these brown sacks are labeled with different categories of terrain. To pull out the terrain, do the same as before and right-click on a sack and click Search. Then, simply drag and drop out the pieces of terrain you desire onto the board. If the terrain falls over, you can press the F key to flip it back. Additionally, if the terrain is too big, you can press the plus or minus keys when hovering over a piece to make it larger or smaller. Once you have all your terrain pieces in place, I recommend selecting all your terrain by clicking and dragging, and then right-click, go to Toggles, and then Lock. This will prevent the terrain from being accidentally bumped or moved while playing. Dice and other gaming materials are located on the same end with terrain. Now is a probably good time to mention that anything in Tabletop Simulator can be duplicated by selecting or hovering over an object and pressing Ctrl and C and then Ctrl V. To roll dice, you can simply hover over a die and press R. You can select multiple dice and press R to roll multiple dice at once. Over here, there are a bunch of pre-labeled tokens you can use to mark in-game effects, as well as proxy bases and cards, which are sometimes used in scenarios. For these, the contents are all the same, so you can just drag and drop whatever token you need from the sack. The first row includes state tokens, which are useful to track things in-game that change frequently. Here I have pulled out the wound penalty counter. You can see as I hover over it, it is telling me it is a charge token currently, but in parentheses it shows 1 of 5. If I right-click on this token and navigate to state, and then select 2, you will notice that it has changed to a stun token. Now, alternatively, you can hover over a state token and press 1 through 5 to have it change to the corresponding state instead of right-clicking. Mana gems, temporary faith, and the bonus characteristics are not only state tokens, but they have incremental counters. Here, I can change the neutral gems to fire by changing the state and then clicking on the buttons on the gem to set the correct value. At the top is a turn counter to track which turn you are on and some generic gems for your use. Lastly, this large brown sack contains a bunch of other unlabeled tokens that you can use to track various effects. To name a token, you can right-click and then go to Name and enter whatever text you prefer. When you hover over this token, it will display the value you have entered. The other end of the table contains all the models and cards required to play. All the factions have been organized under their own tile. If you are not familiar with the images, you can hover over each tile for each faction's name. After constructing your army list, right-click the appropriate faction and go to Search. The first thing you will see in the upper left corner is a deck of cards. You will need to drag this deck to the table. Next, you can manually search or type in the search bar for the various models you need, and then simply drag them to the board. If you need additional of certain models, remember to just Control-C and Control-V while having them selected to copy them. You may also need to differentiate models if you have multiple of the same. You can right-click a model and then modify the name so that it appears on hover. Once you have all your models out, you will need your cards. Right-click on the deck of cards you previously dragged out and go to search. Then, just like you did previously with the models, search and find the cards that you need and drag them out of the deck onto the table. Remember, if you have multiple of the same model, to copy the card and then change the name of both to differentiate. Now that we have all our materials out that we need to play, let's go over some of the tools we will need to actually play the game. To make your activation deck, you will want to drag the cards on top of each other, and they should begin to collapse to make a deck. Once a deck is made, if you need to move the deck, left click and hold for a second until you see it rise, and then you can move the deck. To set your activation sequence, you will first want to press F, which will flip your deck over so your opponent cannot see. Then, right-click on the deck and go to Search. While in the search pane, drag the cards in the order you want your models to activate, with the first model being in the top left corner and continuing to the right, top to bottom, just like you would read a book. Once your deck is set, you can see that by just clicking on the deck and dragging one card off at a time, I press F to flip the card, and we can see the cards are being activated in the order I set. To measure distances in the game, you can select the line tool. While hovering over the line tool, verify centimeters is selected for the units. If not, just click the first bubble until centimeters appears. Now you can click and drag to measure. To move a model, simply left click and hold to begin dragging the model. You will see that a line and value display indicating how far the model has moved from its original position. If your model is not being measured, right-click on the model and go to Toggles and click Measure Movement. Lastly, I wanted to give a huge thanks to the French Confrontation community. They have their own French version of this mod with the Confetti rule set, and a lot of the models and materials were used from there. If you are interested in the Confetti version, I have a link in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have found this helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to post on the Confrontation Discord. My handle is freekittens03, or you can email us at streetsofcadwallon@gmail.com.